Welcome to The Good Life. I'm Ken Mikesell.
And I'm Carolyn Pankalla.
Thank you so much for joining us today. Yes, Carolyn's filling in for Barbara, who's on vacation. So we thank you for joining us today. Those of you that live here, and of course our guests from around the world, stay in resort hotels, welcome to the program today too.
Oh, it's going to be a great show today.
It really is.
It's going to be a great show.
And particularly for those of you that are married and have questions about relationships, and maybe if you're thinking about getting married, then you want to make sure you watch today's program.
You might want to rethink it. No, just kidding. I'm kidding.
That's right, because relation therapist John Wagner and his wife Susan are in the studio today. John's written a new book called Rebuilding Broken Bridges, which examines biblical principles to help couples in crisis. We want to welcome John and Susan Wagner to The Good Life today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for joining us. And in fact, welcome back. I think we've had you, John, but Susan, I think this is the first time you've ever been on with us.
No, I've been on before.
You were with us too? Well, excuse me for not remembering
She's on to make
that.
me look good.
Well, that's right. We all married up, right, John? Well, you wrote, in your book, you're really being very transparent about your failures. By the way, first of all, is this your first book?
Yes, it is.
It is your first book, okay. But you're very transparent about your failures. Why did you decide to be so transparent?
It's a good question. I think the embarrassment of what I did kept me from really being totally transparent. And about a year ago, I had dinner with Pat Love, who trained me in Imago therapy, which is what I do now. And she said, John, couples need to hear that story. So I just decided to be out there and just to put it out there to give couples hope that when they go through that. Because I had an adulterous affair and was unfaithful to my wife, and that's why it was so embarrassing to talk about. But I've decided that I'm helping couples by talking about it.
That's right. Tell us a little bit about how the two of you met.
We actually met at the singles ministry at Calvary Assembly, and I'll never forget the night that she first walked in the room with this hourglass figure and these hot pink pants that I shouldn't have been looking at in church. And I thought, I'm in the promised land.
Very spiritual moment.
Oh yeah, very spiritual moment.
Yeah.
I'm just being transparent.
That's right. That's right.
And then I met her, and she was beautiful on the inside. And we dated a while. And actually, the first time we went out, we both left and said, that's not the one.
Wow.
But we ended up falling in love and getting married.
How long were you married then before the problems started arising?
It was about 8 years. We got married and we carried baggage into our marriage that so many couples do, and we don't understand how that baggage affects us, particularly me. I was successful on the outside, but I was insecure on the inside. And I didn't really understand that, and so we got into arguing and fighting and not really knowing how to solve that. And went to a lot of therapists. They just didn't have the skills to help us.
Well, can you take us into the mind of someone who does the infidelity?
Yeah.
What are you thinking? What is the process that you go through to get to that point, to break your commitment?
I think, first of all, you're not thinking. It's a selfish, deceptive, manipulating thing to do, because I should have gotten a divorce if that's what I wanted to do. Affairs usually are symptomatic of something. Now, we're not going to justify the affair. Right. Everybody could agree it's wrong. Next, it's sin. Next, okay, if we can agree that. But if we don't find out why they happen, and that's what wasn't happening. No therapist was helping us to understand what's going down deep inside of me that allowed that kind of moral failure.
Were you in therapy?
Well, we eventually were.
Right.
But it just didn't help. They just didn't have the skills to help us. We'd go to Christian counselors, pastors, other counselors, and they weren't giving us the skills to get down to the root of the problem.
So were there needs down inside you, not things that really had to do with her, but just things that were down inside you that you, what was it that was...
Well, we're using a selfish way to get a need met.
Okay.
And it's usually about connection. Infidelity is rarely about sex. It's about connection. It's about you see someone and you're in the middle of something that's tragic, and all of a sudden there's a friendly face, and you get sucked into it and end up with those moral failures that I made. And it was a moral failure.
Now, this happens in the church, outside the church.
Sure
in fact,
does.
sometimes it feels like sometimes it's more in the church than outside the church. What happened that caused you to repent or caused you to tell Susan what had happened in your life?
Well, I didn't. She found out.
You found out.
She was a CIA agent.
What he's saying is he wouldn't have told her.
That's right. That's right.
Right. I get it.
Susan, what was the first thing you thought when you found out that John had been unfaithful to you?
I was devastated. Yeah.
And that is the feelings that all women or men, if it happens on the other side, feel is devastation.
Did you immediately want to blame yourself of what have I done? What did I do wrong? Did you take it personally?
You know, I was angry. I was angry at him. So I really didn't.
How did you confront him then? What did you say?
It's been so long ago, I can't remember what I said. But I know that we did, like he said, we went to counseling, and I thought it was over, which it was.
Yeah.
But he was in real estate at the time and found poison in the back of our car, and I thought it was still going on, and I walked out.
So you left.
I did.
But that was a very courageous move on your part.
Yes.
You felt like you needed to do that. Is that right?
You know what? And I really did. One thing, we were at the International Christian Book Convention this past week, and I was just thinking from some things that were said, you know, God, He likes us to be hot or cold, but not lukewarm. And I was hot. I mean, I was angry. I thought I hated him. But that's better than being lukewarm.
Right.
A lot better. But God took me through a time in my life where I was alone with Him. I was very angry with some of my friends, especially a really close friend of mine who said, I'm praying for you and John in your marriage because God says you're going to be back together again. And I said, oh, no, we're not.
Because at that time you were so hurt that you probably did not want to go back into that relationship.
Exactly.
Well, how do you rebuild trust? I mean, to me, that's the number one thing that marriage is built on. And when that trust is broken, how did you restore the trust?
It was a long process.
Very long.
Very long process. But I can say today, I trust Him explicitly.
Now, in your book, you talk about, is it called Imago?
Imago.
Imago Relationship Therapy. First of all, tell us what that is.
Well, it's spelled I-M-A-G-O, and the word imago is actually a Latin word that means image, meaning when we grow up, we have an image in our minds of what our moms and dads as husbands and wives and moms and dads are. Mm-hmm. And sometimes there's hurts that we experience in childhood unintentionally because we're raised by untutored parents who were raised by untutored parents who were raised by untutored parents. And if they knew they were hurting us, and sometimes it's deficit nurturing. A 40-year-old male, trauma to that man is a lot different than trauma to a 5-year-old little boy. Mm-hmm. And so that 5-year-old little boy might say, Daddy's never home because he's working all the time. The 40-year-old man says, Dad had to earn a living. And sometimes it's circumstantial, and if parents know how to compensate for that, then we can get healed, but most of the time they don't. So we grow up with that baggage.
Deficit, what is that called again?
Deficit nurturing. It's like we go through succinct developmental stages in the first 6 years of our life. That's also where our character structure is formed. And sometimes it's just not meeting a need that we have. So that's what we call deficit nurturing. It's not, nobody intentionally meant to do that, but they may not have known we needed that particular need.
So is part of your program that you put people through is going back and sort of looking at their past and seeing where the weaknesses and the strengths were? Is that part of the process? Or?
Yeah, we go back and explore the childhood, not to blame parents, because we're not doing that. We're visiting the past to see if there's a connection, and we know through the research that there is. There is a connection. I think most of us say we marry our mom or dad, both the good and the bad parts. And we don't know that, though, and everything we get attracted to is what drives us crazy later on. So that's a fascinating subject in and of itself.